You know, over the last decade, the Indonesian economy has made some remarkable progress. You can put a lot of that down to the guidance of President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. But with a new president on the way, that'll be a tough act to follow. The economy's averaged growth of 5.8% in the 10 years through 2013. Debt's been slashed from 95% of GDP in 2000 to only 26% last year, helped by a law which caps the budget deficit at 3% of GDP. That's all good news, isn't it? But there could be even better to come. If Indonesia's economy continues to expand at 5% or more, it could be a $1 trillion economy by 2015. GDP per person would rise from $3,500 to $8,500 by 2024, and the consumer market could more than double to $1.3 billion by 2023. But as we say, it's about what a new president can do with all that potential. Here's our Jakarta correspondent, Step Varsen, with some thoughts on that.
After a very dramatic day on Wednesday with two candidates claiming victory and having their own celebrations, Indonesians have now woken up to great confusion. And the newspapers are symbolizing this confusion very well. This newspaper says, a people's victory, saying that Jokowi, Jakarta's governor, has clearly won. And this newspaper says a nation awaits. After tensions were building up on Wednesday night when former General Prabowo Subianto said that the declaration of victory by his contender Jokowi was far too early, both candidates were called by President Yudhoyono, and they basically made an agreement to wait until the official results comes out on July 22nd. There's a lot of fear, though, that the result on that day, the official result, will be different than the result we saw yesterday, where in the quick count, which has been proven reliable in the past, Jokowi was a winner by a margin of around 5%. The question is now if in the next 2 weeks, supporters of both candidates will be patient enough to wait for the official result. And also, what will happen then? If the result is significantly different than what we saw yesterday, then we're in for a long legal battle.
So, yeah, there are huge challenges ahead for Indonesia, and we want to discuss that with Rajiv Biswas, joining us from Zurich, actually, via Skype, but he is the chief Asia-Pacific economist with IHS. Rajiv, we're talking about another Asian country here which has all this growth, all this potential, but still so many issues as well, the corruption, the poor education and health systems. Do you think it looks like Indonesia will have the right person to take it forward?
Once we see the election results are finally declared, and if Jokowi actually becomes the president and leads a coalition government, he will be very focused on infrastructure development and also combating corruption, which is another of Indonesia's great challenges. So I think he is going to be, very focused on addressing some of Indonesia's key challenges to improve its business climate and areas where international investors are looking for improvement. However, where there are more concerns is whether he is going to continue to push for internationalization of the Indonesian economy. Both presidential candidates have had undertones of nationalism in their platforms to varying degrees. And I think the concern from the point of view of global investors would be if Indonesia moves away from a pro-international agenda in terms of its reforms and moves in the direction of a more nationalistic approach, because I think that will not only detract from global investment into Indonesia, but it will also scupper Indonesia's relations with other ASEAN countries, given the ASEAN region is trying to create much greater economic integration.
Something we looked at earlier in our program, Rajiv, was the subsidy situation in Egypt. In Indonesia, I believe you've still got these, ballooning fuel subsidies, and then you've got the widening budget deficits as well. Are these things which can be addressed? How does Indonesia get a grip on them?
I think in the area of fuel subsidies, Indonesia has been trying to reduce fuel subsidies, and it's likely that the incoming government will also try to make further progress with reducing subsidies for fuel, because I think it's quite well understood that it's necessary to do that in order to create room in the budget to spend in other areas, particularly because Jokowi is very keen to promote infrastructure development, so they need some leeway in the budget to do that. Indonesia does have a very good macroeconomic position in terms of its government debt to GDP ratio, which is below 25%, very low by international standards. But they are very focused on their fiscal deficit, and that has slipped somewhat. So they're probably going to try very hard to reduce some of the subsidies in order to focus spending in areas where it's more productive and more efficient use of government resources.
Final thought then, Rajiv, and it kind of goes back to the first question I asked you. Your own research shows you're expecting Indonesia to become a $1 trillion economy, which sounds great. I'm wondering if it is still possible, though, with all the things we mentioned in that first question, the corruption and the work that needs to be done on the education and the health services and those issues.
Well, Indonesia is already very, very close to becoming a $1 trillion economy. In fact, if it grows at around about 5.5% next year, as we expect, it should actually reach that threshold already by 2015. So it's on the threshold of becoming one of Asia's few $1 trillion economies. The challenge, I think, is whether it can double again by 2022, which we do have in our baseline forecast for Indonesia, that by 2022 its GDP doubles to $2 trillion. And I think that's achievable, but a lot of this will depend on whether the new government can really focus on further economic reforms, making Indonesia more competitive for manufacturing. One of the big problems Indonesia needs to address is creating jobs for its young people entering the workforce. It's a very young demographic, but it also means they need to create a lot of jobs. So one of the big challenges for the new government is to really create a much more dynamic business climate that will make Indonesia much more attractive for foreign investment into manufacturing and make Indonesia more of a manufacturing export hub.
That is Rajiv Biswas from IHS talking Indonesia with us. Thanks, Rajiv.
You're most welcome.